So there is a common thread in coaching that you don't want to be the guy to replace the guy. Nobody wants to be the person who steps in for a legend after they retire, are fired, dies, whatever the case may be. That is a somewhat prevailing thought in coaching circles. And I think it makes a lot of sense because all you're going to do is constantly be compared to the legend that you replaced. And it has a somewhat high frequency rate of not going very well for the person who replaces a legend. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere that nobody wants to be the guy to replace the guy overnight. Like there was a pretty long line there of like, well, wait a second, this doesn't go very well for those folks. And that's where you get to say. And in college football, there are coaches who know the hierarchy of where the head coaching job at a school or a certain set number of schools rests. You know that the job at Wake Forest isn't as good as Notre Dame. You know that Utah State isn't as good as Stanford. Like it's just everybody's got kind of the same idea of what that looks like. And then there's the mountaintop, where I don't know that there's just one school at the mountaintop, but there's probably 8 to 10 to 12 schools at the mountaintop where you wouldn't maybe consider going from this school to that school. It's kind of a lateral move. Going from, for instance, say Texas to Alabama wouldn't be viewed as a step up. It would be viewed as a somewhat lateral move. That doesn't mean that I believe Steve Sarkisian when he says that he didn't think about leaving Texas for Alabama. So if you haven't seen the report or whatever, basically, Steve Sarkisian was asked about his interest level in replacing Nick Saban at Alabama. Now, if you remember, Steve Sarkisian was an assistant under Saban at Alabama, left to become the head coach at Texas. He was asked about it, and he said, naturally, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about it. But it took me all of 60 seconds to say, yeah, I'm not doing that. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. And there's kind of two scenarios for why I don't believe that. One, I think everybody in the profession probably thought for a moment of like, okay, do I want to replace Nick Saban at Alabama? And if you believe that you don't want to be the guy to follow the guy, then no, you're like, I'm not. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, I'll think about that. But no, I'm not going to be the guy to replace the guy right now. And then the other side is, if you think that's poppycock, then you go ahead and you think about like, okay, I'm going to, would I kick this around? And the answer is, yeah, you would. I think Steve Sarkisian, he admits, like, yes, did I think about it? Yes. But it took me a minute to say, I'm not doing that. And I don't know that I buy that, because he got a new contract from Texas. He got a $10.3 million a year salary through 2030. Now, I don't know about you, but this has never happened to me. And generally, the only way it happens in college football is if you express an interest or bring it up to somebody or use another job as leverage. I've done good work in my past. I've done phenomenal work, and not once has the boss come to me and said, you know what, you're doing a really great job. You're helping the company make more money. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. So you know what? I'm gonna jack your pay up. I'm just gonna move you to the front of the line. I'm gonna make you the highest paid person in your position. Has that ever happened to you? Because it's never happened to me. Now, every once in a while, you will see, and generally this doesn't happen at the Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida, Georgia, LSU level of college football. It will happen at the Wake Forest, Syracuse, West Virginia, Michigan State, level of we don't want our guy to skedaddle to somewhere else that's viewed as the big time, etc. So I'm going to pay him out of the kindness of my heart without him having to ask, without him having to go interview somewhere else or try to use another job as leverage. It happens, but it doesn't happen at the mountaintop. It doesn't happen in the elite upper echelon programs. So for Texas, for just out of the kindness of their heart, and keep in mind, they did just go to the college football playoff where they lost a tough one to Washington, and they are thrilled with the job that Steve Sarkisian has done. But for them to just out of the kindness of their heart say, you know what, Steve, I was thinking, I was watching the bowl game, and you know what I thought? I thought we're not paying this guy enough. And so a month after the greatest college football coach to ever leave the game, a guy that you coached with and under at the school where the opening happened, where it could be viewed as you were unnatural to replace that guy. A month after they filled that job, we officially have decided you deserve a bigger and better contract. That doesn't happen. That does not happen. They don't. If it was before, if it was, between the bowl game and when Nick Saban announced, like, hey, I'm stepping aside, if they had decided to give Steve Sarkisian a new contract in that time frame, sure, it makes sense. But, and maybe I'm not giving Steve Sarkisian enough credit. Maybe he is a madman and was able to separate. Okay, I don't want to leave Texas for Alabama. And I don't blame him for not wanting to leave Texas for Alabama. What they have cooking at Texas is really good and impressive. When your backup quarterback, whose last name is Manning, goes 17 for 20 in the spring game, goes absolutely off, throws for a couple touchdowns, 330 yards, or whatever the hell it was, and that's your backup, you got things humming. So I don't blame Steve Sarkisian for not wanting the Alabama job. And maybe, just maybe, he has the ability to separate. Okay, did I think about it? Yes, for 60 seconds. And after those 60 seconds, I thought, I don't want to do that. And that's a completely logical decision to come to. Whether you come to that in 60 seconds is what I don't believe. But if he's able to decipher and put together the idea of like, okay, Nick Saban is leaving Alabama, I'm naturally going to be somebody that's going to be connected to this job. And then after a minute, you say, I don't want to leave Texas. I don't want that job. But I certainly could use that to get a raise. If he thought of that, if that's how it all played out, like, more power to you. You deserve a lot of credit. Because if you can think that quickly on the fly, that business savvy, because it's a dog eat dog world. You got to bleep them before they can bleep you. At the end of the day, that's all it comes down to. And so maybe Steve Sarkisian has been around the block enough to know I got to get every last dollar from these folks, because the second they get to sever my head, they're going to do it. I just don't know that people's brains work that fast that after a minute you go, I don't want that job. But also, could this lead to me getting a pay raise down the line? Yeah. Okay. So the fact that you get a $10 million a year contract that gets you an extension through 2030 after Nick Saban announces he's retiring and leaving Alabama has me a little skeptical that maybe you might have thought about it for more than 60 seconds. And I realize that everybody has to say, things that endear them to their fan base. It's the same, like, Ohio State fans got really butthurt when Marcus Freeman had talked about, like, I had the opportunity to choose Notre Dame coming out of high school, and I wasn't going to make the same mistake a second time. He's got to say dumb things that his fans really like. Like, it's this. Do you really believe that when Bruce Springsteen is walking off the stage, like, you've been the best audience, Phoenix? Like, no, he's saying where we are right now. Woo! Like, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. This has been one of the best nights of my life, Topeka. Woo! Like that He didn't really mean that. Okay? And so for Steve Sarkisian to say, hey, I thought about that for about 60 seconds, but by God, the job at the University of Texas at Austin is the world's greatest job. And you know what? People who, when they slice their arms open, when they're working on their trucks or whatever, and that burnt orange comes out, go, hell yeah, brother. Like, that's who he's playing to. But in a business aspect, do I really want, like, I think you thought about it for more than 60 seconds. I think you thought about it for at least a hot second. I think you thought about it long enough to shoot an email to your athletic director to say, like, we need to talk because the Crimson Tide are coming. And if that leads to you getting a $10 million a year contract, I mean, more power to you. But I don't believe you. I think you thought about it for a hot second. And I think anybody would think about it for more than 60 seconds. Anybody would weigh the pros and cons. And if he thought the pros were better at staying at Texas, then I don't know that I can argue with that. But I do think you can probably go like, I think you probably thought about it more than you let on. But then at the same time, I understand why he didn't say that, because if you were to Google like Steve Sarkisian, Alabama, after saying, I would be lying if I told you I didn't think about it, but I only thought about it for 60 seconds. The first headline that pops up is Steve Sarkisian reveals he considered replacing Nick Saban in Alabama. Well, kinda, not really. So I get why everybody has to like not say anything that they actually truly think, feel, or mean. Because when you say like, yeah, I did think about it for about 60 seconds. And then the headline is he reveals he thought about leaving Texas for Alabama. Like, well, I mean, did he technically say that? Yes. But if you've ever, and I will die on this hill, if you have ever started your defense with, well, technically, you have lost. You are incorrect. Nobody likes you. Go away. And that's not just like a college football debate. Like that's in life. If somebody ever hits you with, well, technically, or well, actually, ugh, gross. Stop it. That's enough. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing. So if you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory.